She looked like just another rider in the arena, calm, focused, and completely in control. But what most Heartland fans didn't realize in that moment was that they were watching a real Olympic gold medalist on screen. Yes, this wasn't just acting, and this wasn't just another guest appearance. This was someone who had already made history in real life. And the most surprising part? Her appearance on Heartland wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, powerful, and deeply emotional. It became one of those rare moments where fiction and reality blended so perfectly that many viewers didn't even notice they were watching something truly special. But once you know the full story behind that cameo, the entire scene feels completely different. Heartland has always been known for bringing real emotion to the screen. The show doesn't rely on huge explosions or over-the-top drama. Instead, it tells stories that feel personal, honest, and unforgettable. That's exactly why this particular cameo hit so hard. It happened during a storyline involving Bryce, a former rodeo cowboy struggling with a life-changing injury. Bryce had lost more than just his ability to ride the way he once did. He had lost confidence, purpose, and the connection he had with his horse, Bandit. For someone whose entire identity was built around horses, rodeo, and freedom, being forced to step away from that life felt like losing a part of himself. Amy could see that pain clearly. She understood that Bryce wasn't just trying to sell a horse. He was trying to let go of a dream he thought was over forever. But Amy also knew something else. Sometimes people need more than advice. Sometimes they need proof. They need to see someone standing in front of them who has lived through the same darkness and found a way back. That's when she took Bryce to see someone very special. At first, Bryce had no idea why they were there. He looked around, confused, watching a woman riding in the arena. To him, it seemed ordinary. He even joked about it, asking if Amy wanted to turn Bandit into some kind of fancy dancing horse. But Amy wasn't smiling. She simply told him to keep watching. The rider he was looking at was Lauren Barwick, riding her horse with grace and total control. Every movement was precise. Every step carried confidence. Then came the moment that changed everything. Amy revealed that Lauren was paralyzed. Bryce was stunned. He had been watching her ride without realizing the battle she had already fought. And then came the second shock.
What makes this moment even more powerful is understanding who Lauren Barwick really is outside of Heartland. She wasn't simply brought onto the show for a quick emotional scene or a short inspirational appearance. She was someone whose real-life journey mirrored the exact struggle Bryce was facing. And once you know her story, that short cameo becomes one of the most meaningful moments in the entire series. Before the accident that changed everything, Lauren was already deeply connected to horses. Riding wasn't a hobby for her, it was her life. She had the passion, the discipline, and the competitive spirit that only true horse people understand. Horses were not just animals to her, they were partners, teammates, and part of her identity. Then, in 2000, everything changed in an instant. A training accident left her paralyzed from the waist down. Just like that, the life she had always known seemed to disappear. For many people, that kind of moment becomes the end of the story. Dreams are replaced with limitations, and passion gets buried under pain. People around you start talking about what you can no longer do, instead of what might still be possible. And that can be one of the hardest battles of all. For Lauren, the emotional pain was just as heavy as the physical reality. Imagine spending your entire life building your world around horses, only to suddenly feel like that world has been taken away. That silence after the accident must have been deafening. The uncertainty, the frustration, the feeling that the future no longer looked the way it was supposed to. Bryce was feeling that same kind of loss on Heartland, and that's exactly why Amy brought him there. She knew advice wouldn't be enough. He needed to meet someone who had survived that emotional storm for real. At first, Lauren stepped away from riding completely. She didn't want to go back. And honestly, that makes her story even stronger because it was real. She didn't instantly become a symbol of inspiration. She struggled, she doubted, she questioned everything. That honesty is what made her words to Bryce feel so genuine. When she said she never wanted to ride again after her accident, she meant it. She had lived that pain. She understood the heartbreak of watching someone else ride your horse and feeling like a part of you was being taken with it. But eventually, something changed. The bond with horses was too strong to ignore forever. She found her way back, not by pretending nothing had happened, but by learning how to ride differently.
After meeting Lauren, Bryce could no longer hide behind the idea that selling Bandit was the only option. Something had changed inside him. It wasn't sudden and it wasn't dramatic, but it was there. That small crack in the wall he had built around himself. For so long, he had convinced himself that letting go was the practical choice, that moving on meant accepting defeat quietly and pretending it was maturity. But now, standing face to face with someone who had rebuilt her entire life after losing everything she once knew, Bryce was forced to ask himself one painful question. Was he really being realistic? Or was he just afraid? That question followed him everywhere. Back at Heartland, the silence around Bandit felt different. Before, every glance at the horse reminded Bryce of what he had lost. Now, it reminded him of what he was running from. Horses have a strange way of doing that. They don't care about excuses. They reflect truth. And Bandit, in many ways, was holding up that truth right in front of him. This horse wasn't just property to be sold. Bandit was part of his past, his pride, and the version of himself he wasn't ready to bury. Amy understood that better than anyone. She had seen it before. People trying to walk away from horses when the real reason had nothing to do with the horse at all. She never pushed Bryce with force. That's not how she worked. She knew healing couldn't be rushed. People had to arrive there on their own. But she also knew that sometimes all it takes is one moment, one person, one truth to start that journey. Lauren had been that moment. What makes this storyline so memorable is how realistic it feels. Bryce wasn't magically fixed after one conversation. That would have been too easy, and Heartland has never been about easy answers. Real recovery doesn't happen in a single episode. And that is where this Heartland moment becomes more than just a storyline. It becomes one of the most quietly powerful lessons the show has ever delivered. Because Bryce's journey was never really about whether he could ride again. It was about whether he could accept that his life might still have value, even if it looked completely different from before. That idea is much harder than it sounds. Most people think courage means charging forward without fear. But Heartland shows something deeper. Real courage is standing in front of the life you lost and choosing not to let it define the rest of your story. Bryce had been trapped in comparison. He kept measuring his future against his past, and every time he did, the future looked smaller. That's what pain often does. It convinces you that if life can't be the same, then it can't be good. Lauren shattered that belief without even trying. She wasn't standing there pretending everything was perfect. She wasn't telling Bryce that recovery was easy. In fact, her honesty made the lesson stronger. She admitted she had wanted to walk away from riding forever. She admitted how painful it was to watch someone else ride her horse. She admitted that starting again was not some magical moment of inspiration. It was difficult. It was emotional. It required rebuilding everything. And that truth matters. Because sometimes inspiration feels fake when it skips the pain. People hear success stories and think those people were simply stronger, luckier, or somehow built differently. But Lauren's story reminds us that strength often begins in the exact same place as fear. The difference is what happens next. She felt the loss. She felt the anger. She felt the doubt. She just didn't let those feelings become the end of her story. That message hit Bryce exactly where it needed to. He had been treating Bandit like the final chapter, as if selling the horse would neatly close the book on the life he used to have. But life doesn't work like that. You can't heal by pretending something never mattered. Sometimes healing means facing it directly. It means admitting that yes, this hurts, and yes, I still want to keep going. That's why Amy's role in all of this was so important. She didn't try to